Hello and welcome to the Sardonic Podcast. I am your host who still believes personality is a substitute for size, Elijah Stubbs Roche. And before I introduce my guest this evening, I'd like to give a special shout out to Twitch streamer Set of Astora. His wonderful advice, which includes surround sound sounds like piss and your audio is cancer, has led to the improvement of quality on this podcast. I also made a donation of science to ensure that, in fact, we never learn how to transmit AIDS over the internet just for his sake. But joining me on the desk today is the man who hands out hard hats and pickaxes when he queues up for survivors so killers can tunnel straight to his heart of gold. It's Mario.
Hello.
And the American Medical Journal has him listed as 4 types of cancer, so make sure you touch yourself daily to make sure you don't have him. It's Jake of GreenOrkzGaming.
I'm a little sad now.
It's okay. I promised I'd make some special intros for today, and I did. So, today we have Dead by Daylight on the docket. We are 3 individuals with 3 very different levels of experience with Dead by Daylight. I would say, Jake, you're kind of a hardcore master of the game. You know, what is your level of experience with this game, Jake?
Well, I have, as of right now, 537 hours logged into the game. And if anybody is interested, the achievement count I have currently achieved is 92 of 101. So I'd say I've played the game a bit.
How many times have you hit rank 1 killer, Jake?
Until the new system came out, I had hit rank 1 killer 6 seasons in a row.
Seasons in a row. Mario, you play mostly Survivor with us, but I know you also play a little bit of Killer. How many hours of the game do you have, and what do you say your experience level is?
I have 109 hours, and I am very much a casual in this game. I don't take it very seriously at all, if we're being honest.
And I would say that I'm kind of somewhere between the two of you. I have about 200 or so hours in the game. I think more than that now. I've hit rank 1 killer a single time. I think the highest I've reached with Survivor is 5. And I never really get unless I'm tryharding above rank 7 with killer. So I think we have a nice eclectic and varied opinions on the desk. But one of the things I want to talk about today is also kind of the state of the game. But before we get into the nitty gritty, the details, I want to talk about when you guys play killer, who do you play? This is interesting to me.
Well, I play all of the killers to some degree, except Hag and Wraith, really. But if I had to name a main, it would be Michael Myers, aka The Shape. And I would say the reasons I like Michael Myers so much is because he's got a very powerful yet simple tool to use, as well as just being a fan of the Michael Myers franchise with Halloween and all that.
And Mario, how about you? You play the game more casually. Who do you play?
I like the Doctor, mainly because I like the idea of, I guess, driving survivors insane and then hooking them. And also, it's super satisfying shocking a survivor who's waiting on a pallet and then smacking them when they can't pallet drop you.
Well, I'm a pig player. Newest killer, hype train, all the stuff. I'm sorry. I played the pig and I just thought this is the best feeling. Sneak up on people, watch them run around like chickens with their heads cut off. Mainly because in a few minutes they could very well be a person with their head chopped off. It's a great feeling. It is a great feeling. But the thing is that we actually also Swift together. Us 3. We play Dead by Daylight together as a group a lot. And that's a very different experience. I have found that we we get tunneled a lot. That's definitely one thing that happens to us.
Yeah.
I feel like when you're a Swift group and you perform excellently long enough periods, like if you cost a killer like 4 gens and they've gotten 1 down, that person's probably camped. That's what's going to happen to you now. But before we get into all the aspects of things here, I want to address some state of the game issues here, because we are kind of doing this on the day of the dev stream, so they just dropped a bunch of new information, which I've just put in my session notes that you guys don't have on here. But the first thing I kind of want to talk about is the big wave sweeping Dead by Daylight, and it's the emblem system. There's some pretty heated opinions about the emblem system, and Jake, I wanted to ask you first. What was your initial impression of the emblem system? And now that it's had some time to sit, what do you think of it right now?
Well, before I get into any details, I think it's important to note that they have stated that there are still some issues with the system they're working out. So it's not perfect yet. But I would say my initial reaction was it was good we were getting away from the blood point system for survivors, because for a long time it was just kind of pointless to call survivors skilled, because all they had to do was run around and get points, and that was very easy. But it felt like they kind of cheapened the killer experience by making it so I didn't have to perform as well as killer, because they just kind of handed me scores for doing normal stuff.
That's a very real point. And Mary, I want to talk to you about it real fast. But before that, I want to address one of the things that Jake did bring up, is that yes, tentatively, there is still bugs with the emblem system. That has been confirmed on the dev stream, that there are instances where you're not getting the points you need when you should be getting them. So that's something that we should probably keep in mind while we critique the system, is that it hasn't had all its kinks worked out yet. But getting back to it, Mario, what was your opinion on the emblem system when it dropped? And now that it's had some time, what do you think of it now?
I like the idea behind it, but I think it's, in my opinion, with Survivor, I think it's too hard to rank up. We've had sessions where we've played for hours on end, and I literally went up one rank at most. But at the same time, I play really casually, so I don't really care too much about rank. But it does affect when I'm playing killer, and I'm playing a killer with 2 perks, and I'm going up against people with a full loadout who very clearly should not be ranked 20.
And that is actually something that I think we'll break into right here, is the difference between the emblem system when you're playing as a killer versus when you're playing as a survivor. And at least in my opinion, now when I see the emblem system, is that to me it feels like the killer can rank up based off of his own proactive movement, whereas survivors kind of depend on killers to rank up. Lightbringer points are too difficult, I think, to get sufficiently. There's 5. If assuming that the killer doesn't kick gens, or that you're not regressing progress on purpose, there's 500 Lightbringer points, and in order to get a gold, I think you need 250. Meaning you need to do half of the generators to get a gold medal in Lightbringer, and that can be very difficult. On the flip side, I have found that if a killer sucks, there's no benevolence points. You don't get benevolence points. And you can't just sandbag the killer to get hit on purpose, because then you lose your evader points. This, I think, is the intrinsic issue, is that there's not a way for survivors to get a good score if the killer doesn't want them to, or if the killer is not skilled enough to do it. It can be really frustrating when you feel like you've had a very good game as a survivor. You did all your gens, you cleansed maybe a totem, you opened the exit gate, you avoided a killer, and then you safety. That aggravates me immensely, because I am not the best at running chases. I mean, I can run a bad killer forever, but a good killer will catch me pretty quickly. But I know that's not the same experience for you, Jake, because you're usually our guy who runs around. So I want to ask you about that. Do you feel like you get cheated on Evader, considering you're our main when we swift the guy who runs killers around?
I don't feel like I get cheated, but one thing I would like to see implemented is some notification as to progress during the game of how well I'm doing. Even if it's just a direct correlation with your blood point score events, it just says Lightbringer score increased with it, or anything like that. That's one point. But another thing the point of that Mario brought up about it being too hard to rank up as a survivor, I have gotten the impression that's just false. Once you figure out how the emblems work, it becomes very, very easy to abuse the emblem system. Lightbringer, people are finding you can just 99 the gens, then let the killer kick it and regress it, and bam, since it's based on progress, you then can get more of that, and a full Swift group can manage to get everyone up to iridescent that way. And Unbroken is very easy to get against bad killers, where your evader isn't and benevolence are hurt a little bit by a bad killer. So I think it's more an issue of a young system that hasn't had all the numbers adjusted and the kinks worked out, rather than it being too difficult because survivor playstyles need to evolve to match up.
That's a fair point, and I think that we have seen some massive evolution in Survivor gameplay. I have been seeing different perk loadouts. Like, I've seen less self-care, which I never thought I'd see, in all honesty, in Dead by Daylight. I see less self-care. I see more will make it, so they can really score those benevolence points, guarantee those benevolence hits. But I've also seen, bond and empathy. I even played with someone recently who was running a full open-handed, like, aura reading build, which worked really well for that person. I died, but it's how it goes. But I think transitioning from our survivor play, I want to talk a little bit about the killer side of the emblem system, where people have said that the emblems feel very easy as a killer, and I do agree with this. And I don't necessarily think that it's because it is easier, but because the play style that killers have had to adopt with the previous system is now really being supported by the ranking system. Because as killers haven't changed their tactics. Like, from what I've seen, killers have not, drastically overhauled how they've played the game the way the survivors have had to. It's just that now they're ranking up for it. One of the things I have here on my session notes is Hex Ruin, in regards to the emblem system specifically. Ruin guarantees you a certain degree of Lightbringer points. Or not Lightbringer, Gatekeeper points. But I guess it also gives you Lightbringer points. I now wonder how this game's health looks with a perk like Hex Ruin in the game. Because it feels like this game has never been balanced around the idea of Hex Ruin being ran by literally every killer. And now that they've released the system, Ruin is kind of breaking it. And so, Jake, I want to start with you on this one. Ruin, what do you think about it with this emblem system?
Well, I think Hex Ruin has become, even before the emblem system, a staple, and in a lot of killers' cases, a necessity. Just because to even play the game as the killer, you need to in some way slow the survivors down so you can even get an early game to find people and start playing. I've recently been playing some more killer without Ruin, and have found that even with the new emblem system in place, gens are being done ridiculously fast still, and the onus is on the killer to put pressure on the survivors to slow that down, to get their gatekeeper points. And Ruin does a little bit of that for you, because usually some number of people are looking for the totem, and even if they're trying to work through it, it does delay the amount of gens early done, giving you a bit of early game. But I think it's a bit meta defining and even game breaking in the way the game is currently set up. And I would like to see the devs really look at Ruin and be like, is this a necessity, or is it just the way we've made the game making it a necessity?
Now, Mary, I want to jump to you real fast, because I don't believe you have Hex Ruin on your killers.
I don't.
So you've only actually been on the side of the survivor side of Ruin. And I want to ask you what you think about that, because I hate Ruin as a survivor. But I don't necessarily know if survivors hate Ruin. So I want to ask, what do you feel about Ruin and its impact on a game?
Personally, I don't like Ruin because I'm the kind of survivor who wants to get the gens done and leave. But I would say that I would agree with Jake in that I understand that a lot of killers feel the need to run ruin because, personally in my killer games, I've had several gens done before I found anybody. So I can understand why they would run it. But as a survivor, I don't like it.
And what I found is that on both sides of the coin, as a killer, will try to avoid running ruin if I can because I don't necessarily like the perk. Also, as you guys all know, I have shitty luck. I am a master of getting found first by the killer, and I'm a master of having survivors spawn on top of my hex totems. Without a doubt, this happens all the time. I don't run hex totems for that reason. But the other point, though, that I feel with the ruin is that when I'm playing survivor, I like that what it does gameplay wise. I just wish that it wasn't hex ruin. This makes sense. I feel like as a survivor, the act of hex hunting is a more fun and engaging bit of gameplay than gen rushing. But the fact that the most engaging part of gameplay that's not being chased by a killer is directly just opening the floodgates for gen rushing kind of makes it a little underwhelming. But I guess as a survivor, it is still kind of like a high point when you cleanse a killer's hex totem. I mean, it's not when you get camped 5 minutes later, but there is kind of this oh, I found the killer's hex totem. Man, it's gonna be that sound that it makes. The fact that a killer probably just crapped their pants right when it goes down. It all feels really good. But I also do think that I agree with Jake. The ruin has kind of warped the texture of the game entirely. I think that what it does is very strong, and that it should be looked at. It should be looked at. I don't know what to do with it. I'll admit that now. I not have the background or the intellect of game balance to understand what needs to be done. But in its current state, I feel like Ruin there's too much necessity to run it as a killer.
Well, I feel like the main reason killers run it is because they feel that they need more time. And a suggestion that usually pops up on the subreddit is the devs should maybe add more objectives for the survivors to do, which would, increase gameplay time, but also give survivors more to do than just use gens or power gens,
Yeah, I've always been a big proponent of the extra objectives, not just gens, but maybe flip switches, something like that. Just because I would like to have some new, refreshing twist on gameplay. I doubt that'll happen for a long time, but I think that would be maybe a good place to go if you're looking at adjusting the game to make Ruin a little less overbearing. But the next thing I actually have on here is queue times. I guess Dead by Daylight's official now. It's a real competitive game because the high ranks have a 20-year queue time now.
That's insane.
This is pretty much goes exactly against what Jake said earlier about being difficult to pip as a survivor. Because the proof is in the pudding. People are not pipping as a survivor. And I do think that he's at least partially right, though. That part of that is survivors not having evolved with a meta. I think this is really the first time there has been a really big survivor meta shift. Before,
not since the introduction of Decisive Strike and the like has there been a large shift in what survivors were doing.
Yeah, this is actually the first time survivors have had to change their playstyles to adapt to a new system. So I do think that there's part of that's definitely going on here. But I also do think that you should not have to have generators regress in order to have enough Lightbringer points for everybody to succeed.
I agree with that, which is why I agree with the notion of making dull totems and potentially even searching chests count towards your Lightbringer score, or potentially even Evader, because I guess it's more in line with your boldness points. Just anything to kind of boost those scores.
This is actually an idea that I came up with the other day, because as you guys know, I like to play Ace Visconti. I like to run the loot and pollute build with Ace, find all the chests, get all the good items. But what you guys know is I'll give items away to people. I think, Jake, you have like 30 yellow med kits from me and a ton of green
Quite a few.
ones. I've even given you like 2 or 3 styptic agents
Yep.
that I pulled out of chests. And I think why don't you make that a benevolence thing? Like you give somebody else an item so that they have a better chance of surviving. That's pretty benevolent to do.
So I think the problem with that is you then have people bringing in brown med kits, broken keys, stuff like that, and just setting it down, and then someone else picking it up would then give them you would get your benevolence, and then they could give it to someone, and they would get benevolence.
Then just
It would
make
just
it
be
once per item.
They could, but at the same time, it would I believe it would create an environment of potential farmability.
I mean, you are literally the person who a few moments ago said that in order for Lightbringer to have enough points to go around is to regress the gens to farm them.
Yes, and I also believe I did say that I think they should add more objectives to Lightbringer or Evader categories so that we don't have to farm for it.
That's fair. If you could render it to not be, abusable and farmable, I think that'd be a great solution, though. Because that would give you the ability to have benevolence points in a game where, say, your killer sucks and isn't hitting anybody. Or your killer is trolling and they're not hitting anybody.
I see what you're saying. I don't disagree with it, but I don't entirely trust the Dead by Daylight developers with implementing changes not since 1.9.2.
All right, let's just be completely fair here. If we're going to subtitle everything with not trusting behavior to implement a change, then the point of this podcast is pointless.
Fair enough.
The reality is that yes, behavior when they make a patch introduces bugs. I think we've all
not just bugs, but they also tend to introduce kind of broken or even potentially game warping mechanics and changes that kind of ruin the game.
Okay.
Even if they don't actually break it.
1.9.2 was a very unique patch that I'm certain Dead by Daylight will probably not do again. I think that that one patch is not something we should judge all of behavior on. So, for context, for those of you who might be watching this and didn't play on 1.9.2, first off, good job. That was a good time to not be a part of the game. 1.9.2 was a patch with unbelievable instability. I mean, we had bugs, toxic community events, and bad balance decisions that were all happening simultaneously. And their big next patch was just reverting a lot of it. And so they've garnered what was already kind of a bad reputation for their patches, kind of hit a straight nosedive. I think even the subreddit had to have a new post flare introduced just for this patch. So yes, it's a lot of people are now scared whenever Dead by Daylight talk about introducing mechanics or patches because 1.9.2 was actually a nightmare to play through. There was a reason that we played the minimum required games that patch.
It didn't help that they did it at the same time as a community event so that we had to play to get the rewards.
It was made much worse, too, by the fact that community event was, in its own way, full of toxicity.
The first week, the community really came together to help each other with the objectives. After that, it was every man for himself.
I'm glad that you thought it lasted a week. I think
that's what it was for me, because I actually played solo during.
I think I played the first day everything was normal, and then I began putting Hangman's Trick on everything on day 2.
I didn't like the way it promoted friendly killering, and the way the survivors came to expect it. They expected you to let them do the lunar gens, and then they'd be like, yeah, and then you can throw me on the hook, and then we get to leave, and you get to lose your pips.
Yeah, I didn't care about that so much. I was really sick of the toxic community behavior, the killer camps lunar gen, the Survivor Sabo lunar hooks. It was it was kind of a fucked up time for Dead by Daylight. That 1.9.2.
Yeah,
Some definite growing pains.
people would sabo lunar hooks, then wonder why they got face camped right afterwards.
Exactly. It was. I liked the idea, but 1.9.2 is behind us, so let's leave it in the past and get back to the emblem system because this is the new thing. This is the new hotness. So I kind of want to go down each of the categories on each side real fast and kind of address what we think the big problems is with each one. So we've kind of talked about Survivor a bit. I've said it. I think Lightbringer is too stingy. It's too difficult to get passing marks in that category when you're competing against the other survivors. Anything to add on that one?
I do think that's an interesting point. I shouldn't have to compete with my team for my own score. So yeah, I think that about sums it up.
All right, and then so for the second one we have there's Unbroken. I honestly think Unbroken is fine right now. I think that I don't have any real belligerent issues with Unbroken.
Easily the most balanced Survivor one. You're rewarded very heavily for playing well and not going down, and just for escaping you get gold. So
I feel like Unbroken. If I had one thing I'd change about Unbroken is I wouldn't make it on downs. I'd make it on hooks or moris. Because I feel like losing my score for Unbroken because say I went up with Unbreakable or say I shook off the killer's shoulder. Losing points, that does kind of feel bad. I don't have a glaring issue with how it is now. But I think I might prefer it that way.
Well, you get Evader for escaping the killer's grasp, so I think that's fine. But considering just for escaping the match, you get gold Unbroken. I don't think it's much of a big deal.
Okay. Third one, Benevolence. I think my big gripe with Benevolence was that it's reliant on your teammates getting hooked or injured to get any points in this category. And we have flawless killers before. And we have gotten nothing in this category because of it. I think that is my biggest issue with it. That I think that there should be ways to score Benevolence points that don't rely on the killer.
Working on gens together, perhaps.
Mary, you have anything you think deserves Benevolence points?
I agree with Jake. I think co-op actions in general should count towards benevolence.
Alrighty, and then Evader. This is another one I actually had a little bit of issue with. Because there have been games where I have flawlessly ran a killer without taking a single hit across the entire map. And we've gotten all 5 gens done. And gold Evader, baby. I think that maybe they could stand to make that one a little bit more generous. On the higher tiers, I feel like getting silver Evader is really easy. And then getting gold Evader is really hard.
I agree. Evader and Chaser, both sides of it, feel very inconsistent. And I think part of it is there is no clear indication of when I'm gaining it and when I'm losing it.
Yeah, I honestly can't figure this one out. Like, even the little few tests I've done, it just feels largely inconsistent. And that might be bugs. Like I said, they said there's still bugs. So that could be bugs.
It could be bugs.
Mario, I know you don't run killers around a lot, but you have been in the situation of hiding from killers. What are your experiences with getting the stealth side of Evader points?
I wasn't aware that I got stealth points. Whenever I have a game where you two are running the killer around, I literally don't get anything. Maybe bronze and Evader.
So you can get Evader points for being within the terror radius of a killer.
Well, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Without a chase starting on you.
Well, the thing with that is, it's you guys are running the killer on the other side of the map. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to work on the other side of the map, get the gens done so we can leave. And they don't get stuck on a hook and we can't save them. I feel like I'm being punished, I guess, for not wanting to interact with the killer. And I feel like as a survivor, I shouldn't want to interact with the killer,
That's a great point. That's actually one that I want to talk about because that is your play style. You play stealth, gen rush, get the fuck out, survivor gameplay. You play games where you don't see the killer. That's how you play. and it feels like you do not get anything for that. That you are you pip basically when me and Jake go down, and the other one of us is chasing or running the killer around, and you come save us off the hook. Because if that's
Yeah.
not the situation, you probably safety that game,
Yeah.
and
Or ID pip.
or you depip, because you then get tunneled and camped into the ground. That is sucks that does happen to you so often.
An unproportionate number of tunnels and camps, I would say.
Which is funny because you never BM the killer. You're like the nicest person. You never like teabag at them. You never do any of the cunty things that me and Jake do to killers. But you're the one who gets tunneled and camped.
I think they can sense that I'm not as good at running away as you two are, so they just take what they can get.
Oh, absolutely. When I'm the killer, I don't get rewarded for chasing the best person on the map. I can smell your weakness from a mile away.
Oh yeah.
But we've talked kind of ad nauseum at the survivor side of the emblem system. Let's talk about killers. And so, let's just get it out of the way. Yes, we get a lot of iridescence with the killer. It's kind of hard to judge that system when you're always succeeding in it.
Oh yeah. My first game back with the emblem system, I got 3 iridescence and a gold. So that says a lot.
That is basically what the killer side of the emblem system looks like. And while we could go through each one, I feel like it's all going to amount to it's kind of easy. I would say my big thing with the killer emblem system is that I do think it's a little too easy to pip off of it. I like it better than the old system where kills were the only thing that mattered. So now we can actually kind of build metas and strategies around things that aren't just who's the most time effective killer. But like it makes people like Doc insufferable to play against because you know he's gonna succeed even if all 4 of you get out. Because it probably took you an hour to get out of that map. And there are also some maps that affect like the killer emblem system. So Jake, do you have any strong opinions about like something in the killer side of the emblem system that you'd like to see changed or altered?
Well, first of all, I think it's worth noting that the rise of some more toxic play styles is supported by the emblems. Not that I would ever tell anybody how to play killer. It's your game. Do what you want. I do some pretty shitty stuff all the time. It's just what we do. But for instance, 3-genning, and especially then hooking a survivor and patrolling them within that 3-gen gets you a boatload of gatekeeper, so you're very heavily rewarded there. It gets you devout and malicious for the act of downing them and putting them on the hook, and it will get you more chaser because survivors are so desperate to help their friend that you then get to run them off or maybe even down them and hook them in your 3-gen, and it just compounds from there. The only big change I'd like to see again is just more clarification in the chaser department as to when I'm actually getting chaser score.
We've talked a lot about the emblem system. I think there's things to critique about it, and I do like the system. I think that our critiques have overshadowed the fact that I at least like the new system. I like that things are now more concise, and that your rank is now separate from your scoring mechanism.
I do like that element the most of all, that it's no longer just all about blood points.
But no, let's move on from the emblem system. Let's talk about totems. Because this
Horrible.
was something that you brought up, Jake, last night when we were planning this out, is totems kind of suck. And yet at the same time, they feel kind of necessary.
Well, it comes down to, with the exception of maybe Hex the Third Seal, the totems all have very powerful effects. For instance, Hex Devour Hope can enable me to instantly down someone and then mori them if I've taken the time to get it stacked. I think it's the best example of a good Hex as it is because by the time you know it's doing anything, you may not have looked for it, and now you have to look for it, or it's going to have a compounding, very negative effect on the survivors and a very good effect for the killer. But at the same time, if it spawns on top of a hill with not even any grass to cover it, it's dead in 10 seconds. Well, 17 seconds.
That's kind of been my experience with totems. I said it earlier in the broadcast, but If I run Hex Ruin, it spawns on top of survivors. Like my last 10 games, I've had maybe 30 seconds on my Ruin, and that's me being very generous.
Part of that is the old maps have really, really awkward totem placements because they didn't really design the maps to have totems on them. And then when the Hag came out, they were like, oh shit, we got to put totems on it. Let's just throw them wherever.
Yeah, and then there are some times where you have maps with totems that are untouchable. We were playing against Trapper the other day on Larry's Memorial Institute, and he had a totem in a spot where he could trap, and it was impossible to cleanse it. It was actually impossible because you'd snap his trap, and then he'd be there before you got halfway done with the totem.
He was rewarded for good play.
Yeah.
And a bit of luck.
He guarded that totem like a boss. Hats off to the Trapper. He did it really good. And he killed us, I think, more because of that totem than anything else.
We did spend an awful lot of time trying to smash that totem.
Well, that's because we kept fucking up the Huntress's Lullaby.
Well, me and you did. Mario trucked through it amazingly well.
Yeah, we sucked at Huntress's Lullaby. Mario, you destroyed the Huntress's Lullaby skill checks.
I died way, by the way.
Well, we all died.
Yep. Good gameplay right there. But again, it's like that. There are some maps where finding a hex totem is a nightmare, but I think Bricky actually brought it up in one of his videos where what if a killer could see where all the dull totems were at and could light his hex on that totem?
I do not like that idea.
You don't?
No. Partially because it now adds to the early game dearth again. If it's just going to be ruined anyway, I now have to find it, place it, and any time I might have gained from ruin already being in effect is now gone anyway. The same goes for any effect. I have to make sure that's going for Devour Hope before I can even start hooking people.
What if cleansing the totem only temporarily took the hex off of it?
I've always thought that maybe instead of just temporarily releasing it, maybe with the stackable ones, you get some effect where you're rewarded for having stacked a Lullaby or a Devour Hope, even if they destroy it. For instance, Devour Hope, once it's destroyed, maybe you get a couple % speed boost, or Lullaby, you still get part of the effectiveness of it, where the skill checks are slightly harder. Ruin can just go because it's Ruin. It's probably too strong anyway, and they have to find it. And Hex the Third Seal should probably just be a normal perk.
We were actually having a conversation about Hex the Third Seal before this podcast started. So with the rise of the aura reading perks in lieu of self-care, just because Will Make It is just a better choice right now. For pipping specifically, I think if you're trying to survive, self-care is still a fine choice to make. But if you're looking to pip, bring Will Make It instead. There's some professional advice for you. From a man who's only ever gotten rank 10 survivors, so you should completely trust what I have to say.
Rank 1 survivor is pointless. The games are too fast and the killers are mad.
All the time they're too fast, they're too mad. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was Hex the Third Seal, but also this aura reading perk switch up. I'm getting into perks right now, mostly because we've spent a lot of time talking about the emblem system and we have a whole bunch of things to talk about still. But I think one of the things that a lot of people complain about, I'm not the only one, and I know that you complain about it a lot, Jake, is that they're much more willing at behavior to look at and nerf strong perks rather than look at and buff weak perks. Now, first off, I think perk changes are something new to Dead by Daylight. They haven't... I think they've nerfed Myers perks, but besides those, I can't really think of any other perk that's been massively adjusted since I've been playing this game. So
Borrowed Time.
I'm sure that they will... Well, that's more recent.
Yes, that's true.
Massive perk changes have only kind of been a newer thing. And I think that they might look at some of these later, but as of right now, I get why people have that opinion. But on the
Yeah,
topic of perks and looking at nerfing perks, we watched I watched the dev stream today, and they were talking about decisive strike changes. Now you guys know what these changes are because I told you about them before the podcast started, but I'll reiterate them here in case nobody or somebody watching the stream hasn't watched the dev stream yet. That they are looking to make decisive strike not skill based, so now you will automatically hit the check, and it's no longer based on luck and RNG. So everyone, not just the obsession, will always have the option to use decisive strike. The payoff for decisive strike, though, or the penalty, is that once you use it, you can't heal back up. Now this is tentative, not confirmed. It's a work in progress, but this is what they put on the dev stream. And this is a conversation we were having, but that is kind of a heavy-handed hit on decisive strike. That is a massive hit. Like that's the biggest nerf I've seen in this game since Freddy. And I want to ask your guys' opinion. Like, is this what you want to see happen to decisive strike? Is this the pathway it should go?
Well-
Yes. Fuck Decisive Strike and anybody who uses it.
I think
sorry, continue.
I think if the devs wanted it out of the game, they could have just deleted it. This seems a bit extreme.
I think I think D-Strike is for a lot of people. I know it's not for everybody. I know everybody misses skill check once in a while, but for a lot of people, it's pretty much a get out of jail free card, and it's like, yeah, I guess you could dribble the survivors, but there's really not a whole lot of counterplay to it, you know?
Yeah.
I personally don't like D-Strike at all.
Yeah, that's coming from a guy who mostly plays Survivor.
Yeah.
But I agree. I viscerally hate Decisive Strike in its current form. And I hate it because it scares me away from using Obsession perks. Because I know the guy I'm going to run into for my Obsession perks is that guy with Decisive Strike. It's infuriating. It is absolutely infuriating to spend a lot of time hunting a guy down only to kind of get de-striked for it. I mean, I guess if you're running Remember Me, it feels okay because they de-strike you and you're just like, oh, another stack, boy. You are another stack to me. But I think another thing about perks that I dislike is that I feel like they make perks that address balance issues instead of addressing balance issues.
Band-Aid solutions everywhere.
Band-Aid solutions everywhere. I feel like if you adjusted how objectives are done and the timers and things, you wouldn't have to have a perk like Hexerun in the game. I feel like if, there was some other kind of actual incentive for killers to not camp a person out, they wouldn't have a stack of don't camp perks that killers use and then still camp you anyways. Don't get me wrong. I've been Insidious Camper. I've been reported for it like 9 times. I have done it. I have Leatherface.
Fun fact, not a bannable offense.
Not a bannable offense.
Not even a suspendable offense.
Survivors will tell you otherwise.
Salty
and
bitches.
I will defend some survivors real fast. Because is banning a bannable offense? No. Should it be a bannable offense? No. Does it really suck to be camped out of the game? Yes.
Yes.
It sucks.
Oh, yeah.
I've been camped. I've been tunneled. It's frustrating. It really gets under my skin. Especially when there's other good targets to hit and they'll come after me anyways. Like when a guy runs past 3 people to get to me, that upsets me. I understand why survivors get pissy about it. I do. But I don't want them to just start mass banning Leatherface mains because they all bring Insidious. One of the things actually I wanted to talk about, and I wanted him to be on the podcast, but he's not because he's with his girlfriend, and that makes him happy and me upset because he's not here. We have a friend, Tristan. He was on our first episode of the podcast, and he's colorblind, and that playing killer for him is actually quite difficult. Uh, and I wanted his unique perspective on this, but unfortunately we can't. So Jake, I'm going to refer to you because you've known him, and he's complained to you about this. But what are the things that he can and cannot see?
Well, one thing I think it's fair to point out is with practice and some dedication, he has worked through a lot of it, I think, which is kudos to him. But it does prove that the devs did not take that into account, especially since so much of their balance is based around the visual and audio cues in the game. So someone who is colorblind, and I can't remember the exact type of colorblind he is, but I know he has trouble. It is not red-green. I know he has troubles with a lot of blues and a lot of browns, which a lot of maps are very brown, very blue, very dark. And it makes it harder for him to see survivors on a lot of Macmillan maps because, especially the darker clothes, they just blend all in together for him.
One of the things about this, and the reason why I kind of want to bring it up, is that it is a very difficult thing visually, I guess, to have that kind of disposition. But also, I do think that a game that's balanced around its visuals so much that you don't even have a brightness option to play with can be tricky if you have these kind of hardware deficiencies or maybe just, color blindness issues. I almost make color blindness sound like a hardware deficiency.
Well, it kind of is. Your eyes are kind of like hardware.
Tristan's eyes are not robotic.
It's like if you have a subpar graphics card, but all the time.
Subpar graphics card in the brain. Okay.
No offense to anyone who's colorblind, by the way. It's a joke.
Oh, that's unfortunate. That is unfortunate. I think one last thing I kind of want to touch on. We have 10 minutes left in this podcast, and I think we've talked ad nauseum about some balance things. I think the last balance issue I want to bring up is the big boy in the room when it comes to getting nerfed. Freddy. That behavior has come out and even admitted that they fucked up when they nerfed Freddy. Like that was too extreme, too fast. And I agree. I think that's they way overstepped their bounds when they nerf Freddy. But he's kind of like the big talking point when people talk about what change they like to make or what they would like to buff or balance change they want to see. Is they want to see Freddy come back. Do you guys have Jake? I'll start with you. Do you have any suggestions for the big Freddy boy to make him feel not like shit?
I'd like to see some system in place where survivors are more punished for being put to sleep, and Freddy just actually has a reason to put them to sleep rather than put one person to sleep, tunnel them into the ground, move on to the next because that's really all he can do. Because you put someone to sleep and they just are awake, and you've wasted time out of a chase that you could be spending chasing other people. That's a big one, and I like the micro nap idea that they did come out with. But I think the biggest issue with the Freddy nerf though wasn't just that they nerfed Freddy, but that they only really looked at what Freddy was doing in the higher ranks. Well, not the high. I guess they would be the lower ranks. Your rank 15s to 20s, where he's just a monster storming through Swifts and solos alike because he's harder to play against when you're not as good. And they completely ignored how bad his problems were. And I think they've learned their mistake, and I think they're really working hard to not do that again.
One of the things you'll see, I think they had on one of their more recent stat pages, was that in rank 15 to 20, everything kind of stops. You can play between rank 15 and 20, you can play anything and you'll succeed. That's the caliber of player that exists there. I'm sorry, rank 15 and 20's out there, but you're rank 15 and 20 for a reason.
You're garbage.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, I'm still ranked 15 too, Mario. Don't get too
No,
hurt
I get
about
it.
that.
It's the same argument with like League of Legends. You know, everybody insists that if you know how to play the game, you can play anything at a bronze level.
We're all silver for a reason.
Yeah, Mr. Beast.
This really isn't news to me personally.
But the thing is with Freddy, and they actually brought up a point when they were talking about Trapper today on the dev stream, is the time investment versus time efficiency. They're talking about Trapper today, in that the amount of time it takes for him to set a trap is way longer than the amount of time it takes to disarm a trap. And I think that same theory applies to Freddy. The amount of time it takes to put somebody to sleep is oftentimes way longer than the amount of time that it takes for them to wake up. And let's take this on an average level. Obviously, it's one failed skill check to wake up, but what's the actual time period that it takes for you to get a skill check or get something to wake yourself up with, or find an ally, especially with aura reading coming back?
Bond counters Freddy.
Yeah, like that sounds weird, but Bond is really good at breaking Freddy out. So I think that maybe if you look to adjust Freddy or buff Freddy, that would be the place to start, the time investment versus time saved. And the difference is that Trapper, if you don't want to set traps, you're still a killer. You can still
You
do
still
stuff.
get to be a basic killer.
With Freddy, you don't get that. Like, you actually have to indulge in this time issue in order to just be a baseline killer. And I think that there's a lot of ways to address that, but I kind of want to just put that out there so that hopefully maybe I'll luck out and some dev will see this podcast and, think about that. But I really do like the idea of Freddy, being able to manipulate people in the dream world, but I don't feel like I'm rewarded by just playing the game normally by using my ability.
It's also really fucking dark.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's another thing we'll talk about with Freddy real fast, because I want to get this one out of the way. Freddy has some issues with visibility. He's the only killer with a built-in depth of field. Like, that's the first thing I think a lot of people don't know, is that things appear blurrier as you're further away and your camera's not focused on them. He's the only killer who has that. And because of that, in combination with the mist, it's actually really hard to see things from a distance away. And it can be really infuriating. They could probably handle pulling back on the mist a little bit when you're in Freddy's world. But now I got that off my chest. I want to hit one last topic before we go on, and that's the community of this game.
Garbage.
Pretty firm.
Yeah,
I have an entire folder of screenshots of Salt.
I have run into I've played a lot of League, which was once renowned for its notoriously toxic community, and I think they're at about the same level.
But more condensed.
Yeah.
A lot less players. Very angry people.
I do not get Dead by Daylight Salt. And let me explain. Because Dead by Daylight is not like League of Legends. League of Legends Salt makes sense to me because you will spend 30 minutes to an hour with people you hate. You get an opportunity to actually hate them. That's enough time to do that. A Dead by Daylight game is like
15 minutes at the longest.
15 minutes, longest game you'll probably play. And
I've played longer, very fringe cases.
Yeah. Like, how can you justify getting so angry at somebody over a 15-minute game? You can just play another one. Move on to the next one. When I die in 3 minutes, I spectate your guys' game, we play the next one, and then I secretly die a little inside. That's the normal process of playing a video game.
Yeah, it's like when I get camped and tunneled. I don't like it at all. You guys know this. I hate
Nobody
it.
does.
But it's like at least it's over, It's like, okay, I'm on the hook. I just gotta wait for the bar to run out, and I'm out of the game.
And you're given the option to let go, even. They give you the option to get it over with.
Yeah. But and this is something I want to bring up. But it's like a different beast entirely when it's a toxic survivor, because those motherfuckers will straight up hold the game hostage. They'll they'll wait for you at the hatch, wait for you to do something, and just stare at them. They'll stay at the exit gate waiting for you to take a swing at them. And it's like I know I should just go over and hit them, but I don't want them to win.
You don't want them to
So
have the moral victory in the matter.
yeah, and it's even worse when when they use like stupid excuses like, oh well, we wanted to give you the blood point. Literally no killer cares about the pity points you get from hitting a
We
survivor at
don't
the
need
gate,
your
you know?
pity.
Yeah. It's like just leave, because I obviously had a bad game. I want it to be over, you know?
Here's a public service announcement to survivors everywhere. Get the fuck off the map if the gates are open. If you're going back to save your teammate,
Just
that's one
leave.
thing. Get the fuck out of the map. If you're just there to taunt the killer, leave. Fucking go. We killers don't want your fucking pity points. We don't want your bonus chase points. It's not worth anything to us. It's like 150 points. We're not going to get anything. Just go. Unless you're playing against a Myers who you know has a tombstone. Then feel free to teabag him at the exit gate all day long, because watching you guys get moried at the gate on Reddit is like the funniest thing for me. Keep doing that. But, yeah, the community for this game is really bad. And we shouldn't sound holier than that. We've all said some... Alright, me and Jake have said some fucked up shit over the
It's
chat
in the
menu.
folder. It's in the folder. I could read it out loud. Get banned from YouTube.
Please don't. Those are sacred. Those are beautiful things that we've kept, and also aren't censored, so people would get witch hunted, and I don't want to be Ochido. And like hackers too. There's we've all ran into hackers in Dead by Daylight. They're really aggravating.
Oh yeah.
Like just fucking
Just play the damn game.
play the game.
Why are you here?
Sometimes you lose, man. That's just accept that fact.
That's a very very good point. Sometimes you lose, and that's, I think, the biggest problem with both sides in this community. No one wants to admit when they just lose. There's an issue because I lost is where all this entitlement comes from.
Yeah, and that's on both sides, both killer and survivor.
Yeah, oh, both sides. Super heavily. Killers are like, I've been screwed over by the devs in the game and yada yada bullshit. And the survivors are like, well, you use shitty tactics or your killer is overpowered kind of stuff. It's just like, just play the game. We're here for fun.
Yeah, sometimes you're gonna lose. That's just
It's a game where you play as a monster trying to kill 4 people, and both sides are surprised when the survivors don't want to die and the killer doesn't want to let them go.
How dare you murder me?
It's kind of my job.
Why would you do that? You're supposed to chase me and get hit by pallets.
I have in my session notes here, community, salty as fuck boys you know it, and then subtitled, now I want you to think why and don't just answer whiny killer and entitled survivors. I wanted more thought to go.
People don't know how to lose. That's all it is.
Exactly.
People don't know how to lose.
There's no such thing as losing gracefully anymore, it feels like.
Yeah. This isn't a Dead by Daylight problem. This is a society issue.
The internet gives you that anonymity to let your frustrations out without suffering an immediate consequence. You know, nobody likes losing. I don't like losing, but I would never go off on a homophobic or racist tangent against a killer because I lost, you know?
It's in the folder.
I would just say, GG, maybe take a few minutes off to cool down and move on with my day. But other people, they just go off. They know, well, this guy can't do anything to me, and I'm probably not going to get banned. Or if I do get banned, it's just going to be like maybe a week or two, and they move on. They say their things and they just go away. That's just anonymity, man. It's like the quote says, "Give a man a mask, and he'll show you what he truly believes in." You know.
Can I read just one of these? Just one.
All right, fine.
GG. I respond with GG. He responds with hope you die IRL GG.
I hope you die in real life, but good game though. I'm not one to talk about Salt because I called a man out at the beginning of this stream and wished and hoped for his sake they'd ever learn how to transmit AIDS over the internet. So clearly, I'm a man who is qualified to talk about keeping my cool in those situations, and I'm also certain I have like 2 accounts banned in League of Legends for berating people. Uh, but I have to actually give some respect to Matthew Coate on something. He'll never live this down. But that thing he said about if it's too stressful to play, go play something else for a while. Horribly out of context. The community fucking destroyed him for it. But
But he was right.
I have to give Coate some credit though because he kind of tells you things how they are. Like I don't know how else to put it. It's kind of like when your dad gives you like some of that like hard truth moment, where it's just like this is how things are. It's not pretty, but that's just how it is.
You got your ass kicked. Get over it.
It's like what Quote said is true, but at the same time, it was an answer to a question that was, "It's hard being killer. Can you please help us out?" And a lot of the killer community took it as, "Well, just then fuck off if you don't like it."
We're not wanted here.
Yeah.
Killer strike, baby. That's fucking killer association. What's that killer association that's like out to
the Killer Alliance is also as equally salty as any survivor group.
Yeah, it's like
those are some whiny babies in there.
They're
not wrong,
collection.
But they're whiny.
But like Coate said like another thing on his dev stream recently where we started like patches and like how everyone was disappointed that there wasn't like Freddy buffs on it. He says that, it's a patch full of bug fixes. It's not exciting, but it makes the game better. You might not see what those are. It's like opening a Christmas gift and there are socks inside. That's a good gift. You need socks. That's a fact. But it's not exciting.
That's pretty good.
I liked that analogy because like I said, Matthew Coate has like this weird combination of like perverted dad humor and like tell you straight how it is that I kind of respect. Like the community might have shit on this guy, but I don't know why, but I can't help but kind of respect Matthew Coate. He's really owns...
He also admitted he was wrong and he apologized for it. And
well, he gave what I like to call a Southern apology, which is the "I'm sorry you guys took this out of context, you whiny nerds" kind of apology.
That's the type of apology we deserved. Yeah, we did take it out of context and acted like whiny nerds.
I agree. That's the apology we deserved, and I respect him for giving it. But it's still a Southern style apology right there. But yeah, Coate gets like the raw end of the stick a lot because like whenever something bad happens, like people think it's his fault. But if you watch the dev streams, it's like very clear based off like how he talks that there are other people who are working on this stuff. He has no idea what they're doing, and it breaks, and he goes up and says, "Hey, this is broken." He says, "No, that's working as intended." It's like, "Oh, you get back to your job." There's like I said, 1.9.2 is a patch that I don't think anyone will ever behavior will ever live down. But
even as a casual player, I recognize that 1.9.2 was pretty bad.
It was that I can't give a metric or opinion on how bad 1.92 was. That like to this day they're still fixing things from that patch. They're still bug fixing things. They only recently fixed like all the sound bugs that came out with that patch. It left a trail of destruction far and wide. But it's the community is so shitty with Dead by Daylight, and I feel like so many people like blame behavior for it. And I just like I can't fathom why. It's like they put out a good game that we kind of enjoy playing. Like, does everybody have to shit on them every single time they make a mistake? I don't know. Jake, what do you think about that? What about behavior's degree of responsibility in this?
Nobody hates DBD more than the people who play it. I think that can be applied to most communities on the internet. But I also I can respect behavior's responses to the community because they're always direct. They're always, look, this is what's happening. These are plans we could implement. I really like that they never make promises, because then they can't break them. Anything that is said on the dev stream is subject to immediate and complete. I can't think of the word for it. Revoking it. Yeah. I really like the way they interact with their community, in that they're like, yes, we're paying attention to you, we're listening, but we're not letting you run the show.
It's funny that you bring up that topic of nobody hates something like the community for something does. Because we have a friend. He was on the stream, the podcast last week, Chance, who has expressed that he hates Dead by Daylight and has played it one time. I hate nothing that I've played one time. I've played Sonic 06, and I don't hate Sonic 06, even though I played it one time. It's a weird thing to just, like, when people tell me how much they hate something. They hate it. I hate it when people use the word hate. That's one of the few times I can say that. Because you ruined my word. I like the word hate. I hate lots of things, but now I don't hate anything because all you fuckers used it. Everyone used up all the hate in the world. There's none left for me now. But we were talking about it. A lot of game communities, not just Dead by Daylight, the people who shit on the game the hardest are the people who are like fans of it. Dead by Daylight's like really cool to my brother and to like my dad. Like they see it and it's like, it's a really cool game. It's a really cool idea. They don't see the flaws in it that we do because we obviously have played it for, you know, cumulatively 800 plus hours. But like, the people who hate Dead by Daylight are the people who have like 2,000 hours of Dead by Daylight. I can't imagine loving anything after spending 2,000 hours on it. Like, I don't know if I could be married and then 2,000 hours later I still love my wife the way I did 2,000 hours earlier. That's a lot of things.
Evolve with experience.
Exactly. That's 2,000 hours that I've had now to figure out that maybe this woman's crazy. And Dead by Daylight's the same way. You know, it's like 400 hours later, it's like, yeah, there's issues. There's issues with this game that weren't there when I first played it. And it wasn't that they weren't there, I just didn't know they were there. But I still like the game. I think that at the core there's good things there. There's good games there. And I enjoy Dead by Daylight. It's the game we play the most. And then when we get tilted off the face of the planet, we go play Vermintide.
Woo!
That's a callback right there. But I'm hitting like the 1 minute 15 mark. So is there anything you two want to add before I cut my stream?
Oh, Cheeto deserved his ban.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to give a shout out.
I
want to give a shout out. Before I let Mario speak, I'm going to give a shout out. Sir Rodian on YouTube. Check this guy out.
Very funny.
He's like Ochito without the toxicity, because he also shows the times where he gets downed and crapped on as a player. Even if he recycles like half of Ochito's jokes, he's still. I like him. Check him out. Check him out. All right, now Mario, now you throw your thing in.
I was just gonna say, I was just gonna ask if we could stop giving toxic content creators the time of day.
Oh yeah.
Because, you know, it does ruin the game for a lot of us because their tactics get popular and now we have to deal with it.
Yep. And I think there was one more thing I wanted to talk about. Message to the devs. You can keep flashlights as they are now. Just find a way to make it so that they don't burn out my screens. And with that, this has been the Sardonic Podcast. Thank you for joining me on the desk today, gentlemen.
I love you, behavior.
It's been fun, and I hope to see you all again next week, where the topic will be how to plan a podcast session notes properly. I'm going to probably change that.
Ooh.